Welcome back to a Modern Nonprofit podcast. I'm Tosha Anderson, your host, and today we're going to be talking about fundraising and revolutionizing fundraising and talking about things beyond the ask, or maybe even before the ask, depends on how you think about it. It's not just me, though. I am not an expert in fundraising, although being the financial person in the mix of all the fundraising, I see a lot of fundraising, whether it comes from galas or other special events or grant writing and putting those budgets together, or even just kind of pouring over the financial picture and the fundraising plan for the year. I have a lot of conversations about fundraising, and it's something I'm pretty energized about all the time. Today I brought along a new friend, Jeff Schreifels. You are the principal and owner of Veritus Group, and you've been working in and around the nonprofit space for many years, including your time working with some pretty big organizations like St. Jude's and United Way. And you have a passion for fundraising like me and seeing how fundraising can actually have a pretty transforming impact on nonprofit organizations. And not just about the dollars, but also the donors and for those that are raising those dollars. So, Jeff, first, before we dive into the conversation, I just want to say thank you for joining us and sharing some of your words of wisdom and maybe what we can learn about fundraising in a different way.
Thank you, Tasha. I'm really excited to talk with you today.
Yes, right up your alley.
Yeah.
Any day, I like to talk about money and the impact of money on nonprofits is the intersection of all the worlds that I love. So I'll kind of pitch up my first question for you, Jeff.
Okay.
I've been thinking about this a lot, kind of anticipation of this conversation, and there's lots and lots of conversations out there about fundraising. But I just wanted to ask, what if fundraising isn't just about the money, and how would your nonprofit define its true purpose?
Yeah, you're right. Fundraising isn't really about the money. It is
Hmm.
about building relationships with
Okay.
donors. Ultimately, it's about connecting the donors' passions and interests
Hmm.
as it relates to everything that your nonprofit has, all the programs and projects that make up your mission that's changing the world. And if you
Yeah.
can match up that specific passion and interest with those programs and projects they love,
Hmm.
that's when the money follows. But to
Hmm.
get there is the key. And that is where you're building the relationships, you're creating trust with the donor, and
Mm,
ultimately the money follows.
gotcha.
Yeah.
I've heard this concept before, and as someone that donates to lots of nonprofit organizations, that resonates with me as a donor.
Okay. Good.
I think about that in a way of I wonder if any organization that I've supported in a small way or a big way
Mhm.
really could say they know what I care about. So, in a very practical sense, like how have you done that in your life? I'm talking relationship building, but what does that look like? And then, more importantly, too, I think about how do you capture that in your donor records,
Yeah.
in your
Yeah. That's a
system
great
so that
question.
you know, how do I make a
Yeah.
note of this? Where do I organize? I'm just thinking about the people listening. How do I incorporate that once I find that little nugget? How
Yes.
do I put that in my back pocket
Yeah.
and then use that information when I'm speaking to the donor or when I'm sending marketing campaigns or whatever? I'm just curious because I know you've worked with some really big
Yeah.
organizations that are doing
Yes.
this on a grand scale.
So if you're looking at an organization, the full scope of what they're doing in fundraising, you know, when they're first cultivating or acquiring a donor and they're
Hmm.
using direct response fundraising strategies,
Okay.
what they should be doing along the way is looking at what offers are donors responding to. That will start giving you clues on
Okay.
what the donor cares about,
Mm.
right? So typically, an organization will send out a number of appeals in either email or snail mail,
Hmm.
and through that, be able to see what are donors responding to. So that's
Mm.
one way um, nonprofits are trying to figure out what are donors caring about. And over time, hopefully, they can hone their communications in that area where they want to
Mm.
give in.
Gotcha.
In our space, in the mid and major gift space, that's where we're really trying to, on a granular level, speak to donors one on
Hmm.
one.
Hmm.
And ultimately, for a major gift officer, they should be having those conversations with the donor. What are you interested about? What are you passionate about? And
Mm.
not just what, but why. What's the
Mm.
story? Every donor has a story or or you could say a driver behind their passions and interests.
Sure.
And over time, if you're gaining that donor's trust, that donor will ultimately tell you that story.
Mm,
And once you know that story, it makes it much easier to bring them inspiring offers
hmm
that's related to those specific passions and interests.
hmm
But to answer your question, also, what is a major gift? How do they store that information? Is they're they're having those conversations and they're entering all of that into their database.
Right.
All
You
of
would
those
hope.
notes, everything that you know about that donor should be put into that database
hmm
because, quite honestly, that major gift officer is not going to be there forever.
Right.
That's not their donor, it's the organization's donor.
Right.
And the best gift that a major gift officer could give to the organization is all that information because somebody else is going to come in. And to have that information about the donor is amazing for them to
Absolutely.
continue the relationship.
Absolutely. I want to touch on this concept that you talk about, the permission ask.
Yeah,
You've led many major gift teams across the country, and this
yeah,
is certainly something you have a lot of experience in. Tell us a little bit more about the permission ask and what that
yeah.
means.
Yeah, we call it permission-based asking.
hmm
And essentially, we came up with it because there were a lot of fundraisers with a lot of anxiety, fundraisers and leaders, CEOs, executives,
hmm
around asking donors for gifts. And our process, we put together a structure called
hmm
permission-based asking that essentially allows the donor to lead the conversation with you,
mm
to let that go where that donor wants it to go. But the fundraiser is really asking, is kind of in that um, mode of the keeper of the time with the donor, but
hmm
also is curious and asking questions of the donor
mm
and moving the donor along in the conversation, but allowing the donor to take that conversation where they want to go. So in a sense, you're coming together with a donor and you're kind of setting what we're doing today. You're
mm
asking the donor, "Hey, you said that you have 30 minutes today to talk, and we wanted to talk about this new project that is that true? Is that okay that we continue that discussion?" "Yeah, let's talk about that."
hmm
And then you're asking the donor a number of questions along the way that you've probably had previous conversations with the donor on.
hmm
Just confirming that that donor still is really interested in this project that you two are talking about.
Okay.
And then you're moving that conversation, hopefully, into a solicitation where you're inviting the donor to participate in it. And if the donor says yes or no, you're moving that donor into, oh, well, how would you like to make that gift?
hmm
Allowing the donor to set it from their perspective. And if the donor says no, get further into what were some of the objections.
hmm
And but
mm
at the end of the day, no matter if it's a yes or no, you're always prepared to celebrate that donor, not only for the gift that they probably just made or gifts that they've made in the past and how they're making an impact on your organization.
Right.
So there's this logical looping discussion that you're having. That is very structured, but it allows the donor to say, yes, I want to talk about that, or no, this is the direction I'd like to go in. But when a
Mm.
donor feels like they're in control of that, they're much more apt to move the conversation forward with you.
I love that. I'm gonna throw something at you. And people I think I do this podcast, to teach other people. And that's one part, but it's oftentimes to teach me. So I'm involved with lots of nonprofits, not just from a client perspective, but as I shared with you,
Yeah.
Jeff is a board member.
Yeah.
And there's this like philosophical question that keeps circulating. And it's this need or really just kind of pinpoint down if we have an opportunity to meet, let's say, a major donor,
Mhm.
and they say, what would you do with $1 million gift? We as the organization need to be able to say, this is what we would do with your gift. And now I don't think in real life that's how a stewardship of $1 million gift goes, but that's neither here nor there. I am curious for those organizations that maybe they don't have a new project that's like, look, this is important work that you care about. This is important work we are trying to do. We have a funding gap. Like, we need your support. It's not for the next big shiny object, it's for the continuation of what we're doing.
Mhm.
So, I'm curious from your perspective, is that an okay answer? And how would that conversation look differently with donors with this kind of permission-based ask that you're talking about?
That's a really good question. And yes, I think every organization should have an answer to all of that. Even if it
Mm,
is, we really need that $1 million right now to continue our services. And here's
mm,
what that entails. It's
right.
this, and this. What we love to do is to be able to empower the major gift officer with multiple offers of everything
Hmm.
that the organization does right now.
Okay.
So we often go through this exercise with an organization that involves the CFO, the executive team, the program people, and we sit down at a table and we talk about, okay, what's your entire operating budget? And
Hmm.
within that, all your programs and projects that make up that entire operating budget, including the overhead,
Yeah.
because that is just as important that you allocate towards each of these projects and programs. And what is that figure? What does it cost to actually do that? And then what has already been raised for those programs? And what's left that we
What's the gap?
What's the gap that
Hmm.
donors can fill in? And essentially, we come up with a spreadsheet, if you will, of all the
Hmm.
programs and projects, the cost of all those, including the overhead, what's
Hmm.
been already funded, and what's left, so that
Hmm.
the MGO is empowered to say, I have a donor that loves children's services. And the
Hmm.
children's services this year cost $1.2 million, everything in. And I
Hmm.
have a donor or I have 10 donors that would love to fund that.
Hmm.
That's an amazing thing for the major gift officer to have because then they can inspire their donors to give to that.
Right. And is
And
the fine? Oh,
it
go ahead.
all encompasses the operating plan, right?
Exactly.
It's not
Exactly.
restricted, it's directed.
Right. And that's what I always like to see as the financial person. Let's define those gaps to then
Yeah.
empower our fundraising teams to go out and say, look,
Yes.
we have identified funding for 75% of our program, but the reality is if we don't fill this gap, we may have to reevaluate. Can we still have the impact or the reach that we want in the community with the breadth of services that we are intending? You know, help us with this. And I do think there's
That's right.
space for some of those like big shiny objects. But what I always see with organizations that they feel like in order to attract new dollars that they have to come up with new things. And the accountant in the room is like, we already have a need to underwrite our ongoing operations and we haven't identified all those dollars
Right.
yet. So let's stop adding new, which cost new money, right?
Yes.
When we're still trying to lock in the money we need to continue our ongoing operating support, and what we've already committed to our board, to our community, et cetera. So
I
I
mean,
appreciate you
obviously the
sharing that.
donor loves what you're doing, right?
Mm-hmm.
And let them know all the things that you're doing and what it actually costs.
Right,
you
right.
know, and how they can fit into that.
I love that. So you go back to kind of rewind a little bit. I got on a tangent a little because I had to
That's
get that,
okay.
when you're in front of a donor and you want to ask for the money,
Yeah.
and do you have to have this big new $1 million shiny object project that you haven't started on? And it sounds like no, but know your numbers, know your gaps, and know when your donors already love what you're doing. So I love that. But let's
Yes.
talk about when or what does it take to earn the right to ask? Like, how do you build up to that moment? I've heard, sometimes you need multiple meetings, multiple opportunities to talk to people. Like, when do you, in your experience, feel comfortable with that ask? So I think this is an uncomfortable area. Do I do it now? Do I wait till next time? Always do it in
If
person?
you're, yeah. Well, we always say if you've really developed the relationship, you'll know what's the right time.
Mm,
But, it typically, yes, it's not a first meeting. Um, it takes time to build those relationships. And the other part is, you might have a portfolio if you're a major gift officer of no more than 150 donors, right?
Mm, hmm
So if over time you're going to get to know these donors,
hmm
but you're not going to know them right away. Now, they might be, let's just say a majority are giving 15, $20,000 a year, and they're kind of doing that just kind of on their own.
hmm
It's possible that that's just going to happen whether you're there or not.
hmm
It's really going to take time to build those relationships, especially with what I would say your A tier donors, to start giving transformational gifts.
mm
And that will take time for the major gift officer to really understand those donors' passions and interests.
Sure.
Because without knowing that, we don't see these big gifts. It
hmm
really has to connect. These two things have to come together. The right program and project and the passion and interest.
mm
That has to meet. And in order to get to that point, could take 6 months, 12 months, 24 months. It
hmm
really depends on the donor
mm hmm
and their relationship to your organization.
Maybe how long they've been around and other people they
All
know in the
kinds of,
organization.
yes. But the beauty of
How?
major
Okay.
gifts is that it's all about individuals.
Right.
You can't just say, well, donors are like this. With a
Right.
portfolio of 150, you can say honestly, well, this donor likes this, and this donor wants it this way.
Ah.
We all
mhm.
know these donors individually.
You said, 6, 12, 18 months, maybe even 24 months. So that would assume that you probably need to be connecting with these people multiple times in order to build that rapport, to be able to
Yes,
inch up that gift or to ask for another gift,
absolutely.
if they're not regular givers. That
What we
sense.
do is we help the major gift officers, create that portfolio of qualified donors,
hmm
donors who want a relationship with you. That's number one. That
Mm,
doesn't necessarily mean if a donor gives a qualifying gift amount, doesn't necessarily mean they're a major donor until you've had the conversation with the donor of do they want the one-to-one relationship with you? And
Oh, that's a thing.
we
Okay.
found out that two-thirds of donors don't want that relationship. So if you wanted a full portfolio of 150 donors that are qualified, you need 450 donors that meet your metric
Oh,
in
wow.
order to get to that 150.
Wow.
And
So a
then
third, only
a
a third, you
third of
said? Okay.
donors. So that's a lot of rejection. That
Yeah.
doesn't mean the donor is not giving. It just means
Right.
the donor doesn't want that type of relationship with you.
More passive giving.
More passive giving. But that's
Mm,
fine because now we want to work with those 150 that do want the relationship.
mm,
So let's just say now you have that qualified donor of 150 donors, qualified portfolio, and then you're tiering those donors A, B, and C. You are creating a revenue goal for every donor and a strategic plan that has at least one touch point per month
mm,
over the
mm,
next 12 months. In other words, how are you going to achieve the revenue goal? We're going to do X, Y, Z through all of the different months of the year.
mm.
And so every major gift officer that we work with knows exactly what they're doing every day because they have a plan.
Right. I always, I've spent so much time in the nonprofit world and now I'm, run a
Yeah.
for-profit. And I always think about fundraising similar to my director of business development. He was a former fundraiser. Now he
Yeah.
works, here and he has Salesforce and he has his punch list and he knows who he's talking to and he's
Yep.
got all of his notes and all of these things. It's interesting. I've talked to him. I said, how would you go back and do fundraising differently now that you have kind of created this rhythm and cadence? He's like completely different. So as you're kind of describing mirrors a lot of what I think
Yes.
account executives or people that are more in that kind of development of business, whether it's through donation or sales, right? But
That's
but it's a
right.
very similar.
It is
There's a
exactly
lot of similarities.
very much so because it's about connecting to people and your best salespeople are really good at connecting with people and building
Absolutely,
relationships. It's the
absolutely.
same with a major gift officer.
Okay, you're 30% or one third rather.
Yeah.
surprises me because I hear a lot of statistics and targets around donor retention, and I'm glad you kind
Yes.
of clarified that a little bit. You could have high donor retention. Maybe, I don't know, Jeff, you would know better than me what a good benchmark is. Let's say it's 80%, but when you
Mhm.
said only a third of your donors are going to want that one-on-one
Yes.
relationship. At first, I was like, well, thinking if it's only a third, then how do we get to 80%? But like you said, it's the passive giving,
That's
right?
right.
Send me a little, newsletter
Yep.
update. Maybe I'll send you a check. That's different
Exactly.
than I want you to reach out to me
Yes.
once a year, twice a year, fill me in on the programs, fill me in on what you're doing, and I'm willing to make a big investment in you. So my question is, if you're an organization, you don't really have a lot of major givers at this point, but you have, a lot of smaller passive givers. How do you start converting those people that have shown some interest in giving
Yeah.
and they're smaller dollar amounts?
Yeah.
How do you move them up the ladder to the major givers? Where some of those smaller
Yeah.
organizations you've worked with?
So for smaller organizations, their threshold for a major gift might be $500 in 1 year,
Ah, mm-hmm.
right? Or 250.
Right.
So you start somewhere.
Gotcha.
So you would really do a report on all the donors and what they're giving and take your top donors and start developing a communication plan, one-on-one communication plan with
Mm,
those donors. First, start
mm,
reaching out to them. First, do they want that relationship? Because that's the number one problem that we see with anyone that's working with major donors.
yeah.
They're working with a portfolio mostly of donors that don't want that relationship.
Yeah.
And they're really
Yeah.
frustrated. And if
Right.
you're a shop that has maybe one person doing this work, you of course only want to talk to the people that want to talk to you.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you're wasting a lot of time, the donor's time and your time.
Right.
So find out first, even if it's 10 people,
Right.
you have these 10 people that says, "Yes, I want that relationship." Great. So for those 10 people, create a strategic plan and revenue goals for
Yeah.
those 10 people.
Hmm.
That's how you'd start it.
Interesting. So, Jeff, dumb question. So, I've never done fundraising. So if I were a new major gifts officer,
Yeah.
do you actually ask that specific question? Do you want an ongoing relationship? Well, let's go back to our permissions based, right?
Yeah.
Would it be okay if I stay in touch with you? Like,
Yes.
how do
So
you
that
actually
question, that's a
qualify?
question you would ask. We have a whole process on how to qualify a donor. We have like
Mm,
7 to 9 different touches. And it
mm,
starts out first with an introductory letter like, hey, I'm your new representative of this organization. Here's who I
mm,
am. I'm going to call you in a couple of days. And so they do. And most of the time, they don't answer the phone, but they leave a message. But over time, a number of touches, somehow the donor interacts either through the email
mm, mm,
or the phone. They'll somehow interact and say, yeah, you know what? I would like to see reports on how I'm making an impact on with my giving. Or,
mm,
yeah, I would love to see you. I'd talk to you sometime about this. Or
mm,
take a phone call. And then once you have the phone call and you're starting to talk to them, the major gift officer has a really good idea whether this person really wants to interact further or not.
mm. That makes sense. That makes
But
sense.
the idea is to eventually give them enough opportunity to say, yes, I want this, or you know what, I'm just not interested in that kind of relationship. I love
Yeah.
giving to you guys, but I always give in November, and that's what I'm going to do, and I don't want to hear from you after that.
Yeah.
Okay. You
Yeah.
always honor the donor's preferences.
Hmm. Now, Jeff, we've talked a lot about what I would say, like, is the dream fundraising situation, probably for the donors, probably for those that are responsible for the fundraising. But let's talk a little bit more about what I think is more traditional fundraising that I see more often than not, that you
Okay.
have a very aggressive goal, maybe high pressure. Maybe it's quota based for some organizations, but usually it's like by default, here's a really aggressive top line revenue number. Go out and get it done without a whole lot of
Yeah. Help.
support resources and certainly
Yes.
no robust donor list.
Yes.
Tell me about the risks there and what you've seen and how that goes completely
Well,
left for these
yeah.
organizations that are continuing to operate in that way without
And
any
unf
plan to
yeah.
change.
And unfortunately, that happens a lot. We
Mm-hmm.
run into those major gift officers or former executive directors, and yes, it's widespread that this is
Mm-hmm.
happening.
Mm-hmm.
And it's no wonder that major gift officers last anywhere between 13 and 20 months, and then they're moving on.
Mm-hmm.
They're burned
Mm-hmm.
out, they're disillusioned, they're not happy, there's so much pressure on them, and they try to find another organization that might treat them better.
Mm-hmm.
So, those organizations that are using those practices that you just outlined don't don't work.
Right.
um, and they don't keep their people. And if you're in the position of trying to build relationships with donors and you're not, and your major gift officer's leaving every 15 months,
Right.
you're never really
Never.
establishing those relationships.
Right.
Another new person comes in and tries to do the same thing. You know, it's interesting. I think the worst at this are universities.
Mm.
Universities are all about chasing the money.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to say it. They really are. They're all
Mm.
about meeting these quotas. And the reason I say that is because I've talked to a lot of university major gift officers and I say, what are your challenges? What is your pain points? And this is
Mm.
the number one. Everything you outlined is what they are experiencing. You get this big goal
Right.
from the research team that says,
Mm-hmm.
okay, you have these 300 donors. Um, Based on what we know about their wealth screening and everything else, you should be able to get $3 million in the next 24 months from these donors.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and go at it. And
Yeah.
so
Good luck.
they have all these KPIs of you need to have 30 face-to-face meetings, you need to have this, but all these activity-based KPIs.
Mm-hmm.
And so they're going out, and usually when you have these kind of KPIs, that's all they're working towards. So the major gift officers will tell me, Jeff, the last week of every month, we're all scrambling just to get a meeting with anybody so we can
Right.
check off that box.
Right.
So that's just toxic.
Right.
You know,
May not
they
be
feel
meaningful, but
they
it's just to
right,
mark the box.
exactly.
Yeah.
It feels toxic because they're really not developing relationships. They're
Mm-hmm.
talking to people that don't really want to talk with them.
Right.
A lot of the times they're alumni that really haven't given, or
Right.
if they've given maybe just $25 and now they're expected to get a $100,000 commitment from them because
Right.
their wealth rating says they're worth millions of dollars.
Right.
Well, just because of somebody's worth of millions of dollars doesn't mean they care about this,
Right.
right?
Right.
But they
Yeah.
put all this pressure on the fundraiser to make it happen.
Mm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And unfortunately, that's why you see such high turnover in the university fundraisers.
Interesting. It
Yeah,
makes sense. I mean, it certainly makes sense. Going back to though, I think I'm curious, let's think about like, okay, the old way or the traditional way or the way that we've always been doing it is I think I've read, the average tenure for a director of development is 16 months
yeah,
at any particular organization. Lots of burnout, as you said, even worse in the higher ed, but I still see the same to be true in the social service space. That's most of where, I operate.
yeah,
And I definitely know that I hear all the time wanting to switch to more relational based fundraising, trying to expand the development department to include things like major gift officers
yeah,
or focus on plan giving and that sort of thing that really takes that relationship building. But I'm curious if I'm an executive director and
yeah,
I have the green light to go now hire a director of development or expand my fundraising team to now include this major gift officer. And I'm listening to this episode and I'm like, yeah, we're definitely more on the traditional side where we create the budget and we just kind of,
yeah,
wander in the woods and hope that we find the
yeah,
money that makes up
yeah,
the budget.
yeah,
How would an executive director train their new philosophy of fundraising to their existing team or their new team? And I'm a huge proponent of accountability, but what would the executive director be looking for to see that we are moving into this more relational based fundraising
yeah,
than the traditional way? Because I've met so many executive directors that I think believe this is happening
yeah,
or aspire to have this happening, but
yeah,
because they're not in the conversations, they don't really know or have insights or visibility, or frankly, they don't even know how to train their
yeah,
folks to switch from transactional to relational.
yeah. That's a really good question. I think first I would have them step back one little layer first
Mm,
of trying to understand, do you believe donors, your staff, are as part of your mission as the thing you're doing to help change the world? Because most nonprofits are all centered about one pillar of that mission, and that is the thing they're doing,
hmm
to help make the world a better place.
hmm
And everything else is just a means to justify that end. And so, if you actually believed your staff and your donors were also part of your mission, how would you treat your staff? How would you resource that staff properly?
hmm
So, and also if you looked at your donors as part of your mission, how would your infrastructure of your nonprofit look differently? In other words, do you have the infrastructure set up to report on the impact of that gift?
hmm
Are you training your fundraisers properly? Do they understand the value of building relationships first and the money will follow? Or do you have the ethos as we need to bring in the money now?
hmm
Do we thank our donors properly and quickly? It's like
hmm
so many organizations, they'll take a check and they'll bank the check in a nanosecond,
Right,
but they'll take a month to thank the donor.
right,
You've lost the donor.
right.
So it goes back to understanding if you really believe your mission also includes donors and your staff,
hmm
you would look at them completely different. You would train them. You would provide them the resources they need to be successful. And so it's looking at the entire organization. Do we have a culture of philanthropy that lifts up our people that are working with donors and our donors as real stakeholders in the organization? So, coming from that place, then you can start making those other decisions of where we allocate our resources towards.
Yeah. Makes absolute sense. I am very obsessive. You can talk to my team about this, about the first impressions of this company, whether it's recruits for employees that want to come work here, right? To your
Yeah,
point, my employees are uh, critical to the work that we do here and the impact we have for our
yeah,
clients. But
absolutely.
then also, what is that first impression for those that give us money? So, kind of flipping that script a little bit to, I mean, clients for us, but donors for nonprofits, right?
Yeah,
And I think that to really be able to train and build that culture of philanthropy, I think it's really critical for every leader of a nonprofit to really understand what that impression looks like
that's right.
from the initial entry point all the way through. Like you said, once an identification is made, this person could maybe be a major giver or just an ongoing committed giver, even if it's not
Yeah,
significant in dollars, but maybe it's a monthly giving program, whatever it might be.
yeah,
But how is that experience? And do you know what that experience is? And do you all agree that is that the impression you want to leave on the organization? So I'm probably a little bit more intentional because I'm very high on the aesthetic and I
yeah.
care very much about how things are presented. Not
It's
just on
super
what is the
important.
colors and the graphics, but what is the feeling people get? Do they feel
That's right.
heard? Do they feel seen? Like very relational. Our business is very relational.
Yeah.
And thankfully I kind of have that gift somehow as an accountant, which doesn't usually go hand in hand. But that's
That's why
really
you're
important.
successful.
Hey, I mean,
You
I'm
brought
in the
it
people
together.
business. Exactly. I tell people I'm in the people business. And so
Yeah,
I think it's really, really important to not sleep on, that first impression. And as any leader listening, or even if you're a director of development, maybe you don't oversee all of it, but really understanding how does that make someone be seen, feel heard, all these things, I think are really, really, really important. And you touched on that a little bit. And I want to plus one to everything that you had just said. I know we're
yeah.
running out of time, Jeff, but I always like to ask this question. Everything that we
Okay.
talked about,
Hmm.
these are always topics. I always come in heavy hitting, of
Yeah,
like, these are big topics for organizations. These are real issues, and real struggles that a lot of nonprofits, especially in that small mid-market, they don't have a really robust fundraising team. Maybe they're trying to build that team. They know that they've got some gaps in their donor experience, right? These conversations, I think, are both terrifying and hopeful. for nonprofit leaders that are listening.
Hmm.
And so I always like to leave these types of conversations with this last question, and that
Okay.
is for our listeners that are taking a little inventory of their own fundraising approach. What's one practical next step that they can take today to
Yes.
move to this relational fundraising that we're talking about?
Yeah. The first easy practical step I would recommend is to get their list of donors. And for the first, like, take your top 20 donors and
Mm-hmm.
start calling them and thanking them,
Mm-hmm.
showing gratitude for the gifts that they've given and what their gifts are doing for your organization.
Mm-hmm.
That's the easiest first step you can do to start to reach out to them in a personal one-to-one way. They'll be blown away
Yeah.
because they'll say stuff like, wow, no one's ever called me from any nonprofit that I've
Mm-hmm.
given to. Or, gosh, I've been giving to you forever. And this is the first time someone's reached out to me. This
Yeah.
is great.
Yeah.
That's the first step. And then the next step would really be, again, take those top donors that understand how many of those you could really work with. So if
Mm-hmm.
you're a one-person shop, understand, hey, I only have 10% of my time I can devote to this.
Yeah.
Okay, that would mean they could really only work with 15 donors in
Mm-hmm.
a really truly meaningful way.
Mm-hmm.
That's fine. Find those 15 donors that want that relationship with you and build out a plan to cultivate and steward those 15 donors, 10 donors, five
Right.
donors,
Right.
whatever that is. You can start that now. And it will start to develop within that organization a culture
Mm-hmm.
of building relationships with donors.
I love that. And I want to go back to something you said earlier too, as you're going through that list. If I were starting this task, I
Yeah,
would be, those top 20, like you said, could I define why they give, even if it's not completely on point, but do I know enough about them to say this is why I think they give and what they care about, which might be two different, it might be the same thing. But if you do have those major donors, can you answer those questions? If not, I think that that's a great kind of
exactly.
next conversation to
I mean, wouldn't
have.
you love that to say, tell me, you've been giving to our organization for 10 years now.
Hmm.
Well, why? Why do you
Yeah.
love us? What
Right.
is it that you feel compelled to give to us?
Hmm.
You will find
Exactly.
so much information. People want to
Yes.
talk about themselves and why they do this.
Yes. 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 I share that all the time. I'm often always very surprised when you open up conversations like that. Things that people are passionate about.
Yeah.
Like my team, I talked about business development. You ask a question, what keeps you up at night? That's a conversation that I typically lead with nonprofit leaders, and I get so much information I could have never expected, because I'll use the word passion in a different way, but it's emotionally charged. It takes
It
a lot of
is.
their energy, right? Whether it's good or bad. And people want to talk about that. They want an outlet for that. They want
They
a
do.
solution for it, right? So
Yes.
speaking of solutions, Jeff, there are a lot of people out here that are going to be listening. Yep, this is a moment of conviction. I probably need some more resources or support or help
Yeah.
to get this transition from transactional to relationship.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about your work and how you help nonprofits specifically, but also I definitely want to leave with how do people get in touch with you? Because I think that
Okay.
that's going to be really important.
Well, in a quick way, what Veritas does is we come alongside organizations. We first look at data and we do a free data assessment
Hmm.
that really tells them how their donors have been behaving and where they could go in 5 years if they had a robust mid and major gift program. And so that's one thing that we do right away and we help organizations with. And then once they say, yes, we'd like your help, we help them develop their portfolios. We put a structure to their goal setting and a strategic plan. And then we work with them every week to
Mm,
ensure that they stay focused and accountable, that we're coming alongside of them and encouraging them so that they actually implement the plan that they've set
mm,
out.
hmm.
So that's what we do on the consulting side. We also have a Veritas Group Academy with online training courses. So we have
Hmm.
3 certification courses for mid, major, and executives all around major gifts and how
Mm,
to start a major gift program, how to make it thrive. And so we did that because we wanted to get our information out to as many people. So we've trained over 7,000 fundraisers all over the world to date
Wow.
on major gifts. And then the other part is we have this website, veritusgroup.com, that has so many free resources. We have 25 white papers, we have podcasts, we have webinars that are free, and it basically answers any question you have about major gifts. And so you can go to our website. Veritas has always had the ethos of let's give away everything we know. And some of those people will come back to us and say, hey, we need your help to do it. But the majority of them don't, and that's okay. The ones that have said yes have kept us in business for over 16 years. And it's because we've given away that information. Um, and we've got a couple of books that we've read, all of those things about major gifts that if you read the book, you could start your own mid or major gift program and make it thrive.
Okay.
So, yeah,
That's so helpful. I will put all of that information in the show notes, especially your website. Sounds like that might be an easy way to find you, if people wanting to get
yep.
in touch
You can find me
specifically,
on
and all the
LinkedIn, Jeff
resources.
Schreifels.
Okay. Excellent.
Connect.
Well, Jeff, this has been such a pleasure. I know it's really going to be insightful for those listeners. And speaking of listeners, my shameless plug, please engage with this content in some way. If you found some meaningful insights on this conversation, go ahead and like, subscribe, share, tag, whatever it might be. Interact with the content in some way because that's how other nonprofit leaders like yourself find topics and conversations like this and help them solve their next big problem in their nonprofit. Thank you all so much for listening. I'll see you next time. Bye.